All right, guys, so for this very first video in this series, walking through the comparison of Avid controllers to SSL, I want to take a look at the Dock versus the UC1. And all I'm doing right now is just looking at the two controllers, just for the buttons that they have and the features that I know off the top of my head that allows you to have, and just kind of just compare the two before we even just get into using them, just comparing them right here on the desk, just looking at the surfaces. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, so here we have the UC1. Right off the bat, it looks like an SSL plugin. I think most of you guys know that right now. They've kind of patterned this to look like their plugins, and it's mapped to their plugins. So right over here, you have your filter, so your high filter and your low filter. Then you have your high frequency EQ and your bell button there, gain frequency, and then your high mid frequency and your low mid frequency. And in both of those, you have gain, frequency, and Q controls. And then right here, you actually have your N button. And then this E button is going to be for if you're using the 9000 plugin, you can actually switch between the E and the E and G, EQ. If you're just using the 4KB plugin, then that button won't do anything because the 4K was only the 4K. It was the E. There was no G. So that's all you got there. And then at the bottom down here, the last one is going to be your low frequency gain and frequency control there. And then of course your bell switch. That's the EQ side. And then if we go over to the right hand side, you have your compressor. So that's kind of cool. On the left, you have your EQ. On the right, you have compressor. So you've got your fast attack button, your peak button there, ratio, threshold, release, and then your input there. That's going to be to engage the compressor, to put it actually in. And then you have your gate expander down here. So you have your range, threshold, release, hold, and then the expand button if you want to flip to expand, and then the fast attack button for the gate. And then down here at the bottom, you have a channel section. So you've got a phase reverse button, your sidechain listen, solo clear. Okay, that's kind of cool. And then these buttons here are just going to be solo and cut. And fine, if you hit the fine, when you make adjustments here, it's going to make those adjustments much finer. And then channel in, turning the channel on and off like a bypass switch right there. The center section is going to be the bus compressor. So right there, you got a nice gauge. You got your meter there. So that's pretty nice to have a meter built into the control surface just for visual aid. So you have your threshold, your makeup gain, attack, release, ratio, the N button, your sidechain high pass filter, and then a mix knob, which isn't on the original hardware. That's something that they added in the plugin to have the mix knob. But I mean, that looks just like an SSL. And you have input and output. That's for the entire channel strip. So whichever channel strip you're using, that's going to be your input, and then your output here. And then the very bottom down here, we have a few buttons. We've got a 360 button that opens the actual 360 software if you want to use that. And this search icon there, I'm not really 100% sure what that does. We'll have to find out. Down here, you've got a couple buttons. You got routing, presets, confirm, and then that's a back button. So this is going to be to change your routing for how, when you're in a channel strip, on a SSL, you can change how the flow of the processors go. Does it go EQ compressor filter, or does it go filter compressor EQ, what have you? So that's gonna be for that. Presets is gonna be how you access your preset menu. When you hit that, you actually can see your presets here on this screen. So that's kind of cool. Got a nice little jog wheel here to scroll through things and select them while you have that on the screen. And then your channel select here, this is gonna be for scrolling through your different channels in 360 for sure. I'm not sure if that works in the actual session that you're working in, so we'll check that once we get everything plugged in. So yeah, that is that with the SSL. All right, so the dock is not laid out like a plugin. It is laid out like a control surface that's meant to give you access quickly to certain functions within your DAW, as well as some knobs up here for plug-in control. And then you have soft keys there that are programmable. And then you have horizontal and vertical touch strips that are both programmable within the software. So right there, we're seeing some clear differences. Transport controls right here. And there's two layers to these transport. So if you notice, you have obviously the buttons there, like play, stop. But then if you notice, there's these extra functions there that you access by holding shift. So by default, you have play and stop, but then if you hold shift, you can actually hit this and do pre and post roll, your different record modes on that one. By default, this is going to be loop playback, but you can actually hold shift and hit that to get loop record. user layer. And so you got that there. Right here, these functions are going to be for nudging and banking. So if you just hit them, it's going to bank your entire session if you have your session up here. And then if you hold shift, it's going to nudge. Then you have scrolling and zooming functions there. The jog and shuttle mode, so that's going to be how you activate the wheel if you want to use it for jog and shuttle. And then actually going back real quick, and when you use zoom, if you hit zoom, then this wheel will do the zooming for you. So if you're scrolling or zooming, this wheel actually does that depending on which mode you're in. Move to select, that's actually a really cool feature that I will show you guys. What it does is when you hit that, whatever selection you have on the screen, you can actually move it with the jog wheel. So you can move it throughout the session very easily, so that's really cool. Do to selected or do to all, right there, we're very familiar with that. It's normally a shortcut on your keyboard, but there's a button for that. And then you have a application or workstation switch button there that I honestly don't use that much, but it is there if you want to use it. Then you have OK and cancel for just confirming screens that are up on the screen. And then you have a user button. So you have two user layers right here that you can do buttons for. So I have this one set to clip gain, which allows this to work for clip gain. And then this one I actually don't have assigned to anything currently. And then a nice handy dandy save button there that you have to double click to save. Going over to the left side, this is one of my favorite sections of this controller. This is the automation section. So first thing you have is your different automation write modes. So you have write, touch, latch, trim, and read. And then getting into some of the more advanced functions, you have join, auto join, suspend automation, the automation off. And then if you want to open the automation window, that's right there. And then this alt button opens up this alt layer where you start getting into preview automation. So if you want to go preview, punch preview, suspend preview, capture, punch capture, auto matching, which is great. You definitely want to use that when you're doing different automations, especially in post-production. And then you have your write to commands on this side. You have all selected, start, end, punch, and next. So right there, we can see some key differences that they've given you a lot of your automation controls right here at your fingertips. And I'm going to tell you right now, I use these things all day long because I am writing tons and tons of automation for films and even songs when I'm mixing music, that I need those automation functions right there in front of me. I cannot function without having them. Now, you can access them in the app. So if you have a tablet connected to the dock, then you can access a lot of those functions in the app, but that means going through your pages and things like that. And it's just much nicer to have dedicated buttons here on the surface for them. Next thing is there is a actual fader on this one. The UC1 does not have a fader, but the UF1 does. So I will go ahead and mention that if you get the UF1 from Solid State Logic, which is the newer of their lineup, then you actually do get a fader on that particular unit. What's cool about this fader is you can assign it to a specific thing if you want to, or you can have it be an auto assignment, or one of my favorite things is this acts as a focus fader. And if you're not familiar with a focus fader, basically a focus fader is it gets its function from whatever you have selected on the screen. For instance, if I select the kick drum track, the kick drum track is automatically going to populate there. If I select a keyboard track, the keyboard track is automatically going to pop up there. And that is something that you can control in the EUCON software, very in-depth software that you can actually customize to your liking. So if you don't want it to do that, you actually can turn that feature off. But I really like that it does that because it always brings my most current track that I'm working with to the very forefront, and I can control it from right there. You have a select button and record button right there that can be used for multiple things as well. And you have solo and mute functions there for whatever track that is that's selected. And then these soft keys here, they have buttons that are attached to what's showing up on the app. So when you actually have the DAW open, when we get to that, you'll actually see functions there that you can use these buttons to control. And then there are different user layers that you can put to where you can customize your own buttons there. And that's the other thing too, is when you get into EUCON, not only do you have a lot of stuff that's already default set up for you very nicely, there's a lot of things that you can customize. So, you know, if you've ever heard of Keyboard Maestro or SoundFlow, you can do some of the same stuff here with these soft keys. You just program the soft keys and you can have your own custom macros there. And you can even have, if you want to access more than what's there, you can actually go up here on the screen and have them up on the screen and access even more. So that's there with these buttons that are here. This is a control room monitor knob. So if you're actually using EUCON for your monitor controller, you can actually use this to turn volume up and down and mute. But another cool function is actually that with this, there's a mode within EUCON that you can enable to where if you hover over a knob or something inside of Pro Tools, you can actually use this to control that. So for instance, if I hover over the Q of an EQ and I turn this knob, then it's going to control that. So it's kind of a cool feature that they have there. I want to say SSL has that same thing on the UF8. We'll look at that when we get into the software. I'm not sure if they have it on the UC1, but I know the UF8 does have a similar focus kind of mode thing. Lastly, up here is you have 8 knobs, which these are going to be for plugin control, panning, anything that you have up on the screen. When you open up plugins, they populate on the screen, and then you have your different controls here for that. And it's kind of cool because you can either choose to control it with the knobs, or you can still use the touchscreen here on the tablet. So very nice to be able to have, you know, differentiation of however you want to work for different tasks there. All right, so that was just a quick overview of the two surfaces and what features that they have just directly that we could just look at in front of us and see. And for me, right off the bat, I can, like I said, the automation features that I have access to right here on the dock are major components to my workflow, and part of the whole reason why we want to get surfaces is for workflow enhancement. And so I can already tell you right now that is a negative mark for me on the SSL, that it doesn't have those automation buttons right there for me. And even though I can go into the app and access them, the fact that they're right here on the dock, it just makes it that much faster for me in my everyday workflow. And if you use a lot of automation, the preview, punch preview, capture, those kind of things, then that's going to be something that you're going to want to heavily consider when you look at the SSL, because it doesn't have those buttons right there built into it. Next time, we're going to look at the UF8 versus the Artist Mix, as well as the S1. So y'all stay tuned for that one, and I'll catch you then. Peace.